looking everywhere, that's how the story goes.
Welcome to the Zombie Story Zone, your ultimate destination for spine-chilling tales of survival, suspense, and the undead. If you're a fan of gripping stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, you're in the right place. Tonight, we bring you an electrifying story that delves into a nightmare, unlike any other a town, terrorized by invisible zombies. Yes, you heard that right, invisible zombies. The unseen terror will leave you questioning every shadow, every sound, and every ripple in the air. Before we dive into this harrowing tale, we'd like to ask for your support. If you enjoy the content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on the latest zombie adventures. Don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Sharing is caring, so please share this video with your friends who love a good thrill. We'd also love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments how you liked the story and what we can do to make our channel even better. Your feedback helps us grow and bring you the content you crave. Now, turn off the lights, settle in, and prepare for a story that will haunt your dreams. Let's begin.
Welcome to the Zombie Story Zone, where the tales of the undead widely known. Join the hunt, uncover the fight in the Zombie Story Zone.
The night was unusually quiet in the small town of Pine Hollow. The faint rustle of leaves in the cold breeze and the occasional chirp of crickets were the only sounds that broke the eerie silence. It was a place where everyone knew each other and nothing out of the ordinary ever happened until now. It began subtly, like a shadow passing unnoticed. The first to disappear was Old Man Callahan, the town's reclusive clockmaker. His shop was left undisturbed, the tools of his trade still neatly arranged. The only clue was a trail of overturned chairs leading to the back door, which hung ajar, swinging lazily in the wind. The town's sheriff, Grace Harper, was the first to investigate. Callahan had always been a bit of an oddity, but his disappearance sent ripples of unease through Pine Hollow. Grace stood in the dim light of his shop, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. "It's like he just vanished," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe he skipped town," Deputy Nate suggested, though his tone betrayed his doubt. Grace shook her head. Not Callahan. He'd never leave without his tools. As the days passed, more townsfolk began to vanish. A schoolteacher, a mechanic, a mother and her child. Always without a trace, leaving behind only minor signs of struggle, a spilled coffee cup, a broken picture frame, a trail of footprints that seemed to end abruptly. The townspeople grew restless, their fear palpable. One evening, Grace called an emergency meeting at the town hall. The room buzzed with tension as the townsfolk crowded together, their voices rising in panic. "We've got to do something," shouted Tom Briggs, the burly owner of the local diner. "What can we do?" countered Mary Lou, clutching her rosary. "It's like the devil himself is taking us." Grace raised her hands, commanding silence. "We don't know what's happening, but panicking won't help. Everyone needs to stay indoors after sunset and keep their doors locked. If you see or hear anything unusual, call me immediately." The crowd reluctantly dispersed, but the unease lingered. Grace stayed behind, poring over maps and reports, trying to find a pattern in the disappearances. Her phone buzzed, startling her. It was Nate. "Sheriff, you need to come to the old mill," he said, his voice trembling. I found something." The old mill stood on the outskirts of town, abandoned for decades. Its decaying structure loomed like a skeletal sentinel against the moonlit sky. Grace arrived to find Nate waiting, his flashlight flickering nervously. "What is it?" she asked. Nate pointed toward the mill's entrance. "Tracks. And blood. A lot of it." Grace followed his beam of light. The tracks were strange, almost human, but with an unnatural gait. They led inside. She drew her gun, motioning for Nate to follow. The air inside the mill was thick with the stench of decay. The floor was slick, and Grace's flashlight revealed a horrifying scene, blood splattered across the walls and piles of torn clothing. But there were no bodies. "What the hell happened here?" Nate whispered, his voice quaking. A sudden noise froze them both. A faint, wet sound, like something being dragged. Grace signaled for Nate to stay put and crept toward the source. Her flashlight illuminated a corner of the room, and for a moment, she saw nothing. Then, movement. Subtle, almost imperceptible. She blinked, her eyes struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. It was as if the air itself rippled and twisted, forming a vague, humanoid shape. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The creature was invisible, its outline only discernible through the faint distortion it caused. "Nate, get out," she shouted, but it was too late. The creature lunged, its presence marked by the violent spray of blood as Nate was yanked into the shadows. His screams echoed briefly, then silence. Grace fired her weapon blindly, the muzzle flashes illuminating the dark, but the creature was gone. Her heart pounded as she stumbled out of the mill, her mind racing. She had to warn the town. The next day, Grace stood in the middle of Main Street, addressing the frightened crowd. "We are dealing with something not human," she began, struggling to find the right words. "These things are invisible, but they are real. And they are hunting us." The crowd erupted in chaos, but Grace's steely gaze silenced them. "We need to stick together. Board up your homes, stay in groups, and don't go out at night. We'll figure this out." But the attacks continued. The creatures seemed to grow bolder, their presence marked by eerie sounds and fleeting distortions. The townsfolk's fear turned to desperation as their numbers dwindled. Grace knew they couldn't hold out much longer. She gathered the remaining townspeople at the church, the sturdiest building in Pine Hollow. They barricaded the doors and windows, arming themselves with whatever they could find. As night fell, the church became a fortress of fear. The creatures circled outside, their guttural growls and the scrape of claws on wood sending shivers down spines. Then, the attacks began. Windows shattered and doors buckled under the assault. Grace fought valiantly, her shotgun roaring in the chaos. The townsfolk joined her, their collective resolve a beacon of hope. But the creatures were relentless, their invisible forms slipping through defenses like wraiths. Hours passed and the town's numbers thinned further. Grace held her ground in the church, organizing shifts of the remaining townspeople to keep watch. By midnight, the air was thick with the smell of blood and gunpowder. Exhaustion weighed heavy on everyone. "Sheriff," whispered Tom Briggs, now visibly shaken and clutching a crowbar. "We can't last another night. What are we supposed to do against something we can't see?" "We keep fighting," Grace replied, her voice steely but quiet. "And if we can't see them, we find another way to track them." Tom's expression betrayed his skepticism. Before he could speak further, a loud crash reverberated through the sanctuary. A distorted ripple shimmered in the air where the door had been, and a figure lunged forward. It wasn't just one creature this time, there were many. The group fought desperately, using whatever they could as makeshift weapons. Fire extinguishers were sprayed to reveal faint outlines of the creatures, giving brief glimpses before the monsters vanished into thin air again. People screamed and chaos unfolded, but Grace stayed composed, barking orders and aiming for what little she could see of the attackers. The night dragged on until only Grace and a handful of survivors remained. As dawn broke, the creatures retreated, slipping away like whispers on the wind. The survivors sat huddled, their faces pale and eyes hollow. "They'll be back tonight," Mary Lou muttered, clutching her rosary tighter. "We can't keep doing this." Grace nodded grimly. "We won't. There's something about this town, something drawing them here. I need to find out what it is." Determined to uncover the truth, Grace delved into Pine Hollow's history. Old records and newspaper clippings painted a disturbing picture. Decades ago, a military research facility had operated on the outskirts of town, conducting experiments shrouded in secrecy. The facility had been shut down after a mysterious incident that claimed the lives of everyone inside. "They are not just monsters," Grace muttered to herself, piecing together the fragments of evidence. "They are the result of something human, something that went horribly wrong." That night, armed with newfound determination, Grace led the survivors to the site of the old facility. Its ruins stood hidden beneath overgrown vegetation, the air thick with an unnatural chill. As they searched, Grace discovered a hidden entrance leading to an underground lab. Inside, they found remnants of experiments, files, strange equipment, and a containment chamber smeared with claw marks. A journal lay open on a desk, its pages filled with frantic scrawls describing a project called Spectre. The experiment had aimed to create invisible soldiers but had instead unleashed a deadly force that could not be controlled. "This is it," Grace said, her voice grim. "This is where it all started." Suddenly, the ground shook and the air grew cold. The creatures had followed them. This time, there was no escape. The survivors prepared for their final stand, their faces resolute despite the terror in their eyes. "If this is the end," Grace said, cocking her shotgun, "we go down fighting." The battle that ensued was fierce and chaotic, the confined space of the lab amplifying every sound and every flash of light. Grace fought like a woman possessed, her determination driving her to protect what little remained of her town. In the end, it was not bullets or bravery that ended the nightmare, but a desperate gamble. Grace overloaded the facility's power core, unleashing a fiery explosion that consumed the lab and the creatures within. When the dust settled, Pine Hollow was a shadow of its former self. The few survivors emerged into the light of dawn, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion. Grace stood among them, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's over," Mary Lou said, her voice trembling. Grace shook her head. "Not over. Not forgotten. We'll rebuild and we'll remember. For those we lost." And so, Pine Hollow began to heal, its scars a testament to the unseen threat that had once terrorized its streets. But in the quiet of the night, Grace often found herself staring into the darkness, wondering if the creatures were truly gone or merely waiting.
It's a crazy mix. With every twist and turn, we'll learn some new tricks. So grab your frames, let's dive right in the zombie story zone. Let the fun begin.